Chinese regime has a secret system to make money, and it forces doctors to do things that doctors should never, ever do. Welcome to China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell. You know, some people say Chinese communist officials are heartless, but it turns out they have plenty of hearts, because new research shows they're just taking them from people who are alive. And if you're picturing that scene from Temple of Doom, the Indiana Jones movie where the high priest rips out a man's still beating heart, well, that's totally wrong. See, in China, it happens in a hospital by a surgeon. The horns are real, though. And before you say, Chris, you're crazy, that could never happen, let me remind you that communist China is a place where authorities routinely round up ethnic minorities and send them to labor camps. The government forcibly sterilizes women and then rebrands it as feminism. And top-level party officials covered up a deadly pandemic for 6 weeks so they could hoard medical supplies. That killed millions of people. So what's a few thousand extra deaths a year by forced organ extraction, am I right? And before you say, Chris, maybe you're right, but this is a comedy show on YouTube. Won't you think about the children? I am. Mainly how their hearts are probably seen as more valuable since they're so young and fresh. Where was I? Oh, right. China's transplant surgeons are executing prisoners by extracting their hearts. And remember, prisoners in China can be anyone, not just criminals. I've talked in previous episodes about how the Chinese regime kills innocent people for organs. And there are credible reports that some of the detention centers in Xinjiang might actually just be giant organ banks of ethnic minorities, where hospitals are waiting to match their blood type to a potential organ recipient. And the worst part is they always take really essential body parts instead of the ones the victims don't care about. Why can't we ever hear stories about how someone had their appendix or tonsils stolen? Or someone was drugged, woke up in a tub of ice and realized their stomach fat was stolen via liposuction. I'm not even mad about this. Now in China they take the lungs, the liver, the heart, all the important stuff. Well, I suppose it is possible to live without a heart. But what makes this latest report different and even more Temple of Doomy is that it shows how the Chinese Communist Party is not just killing people and then taking their organs. In many cases, the organ removal is the cause of death. The report published in April calls it execution by organ procurement. The researchers published their study in the American Journal of Transplantation, so pretty legit. They discovered what was happening by analyzing more than 120,000 Chinese language medical publications, and by closely examining the medical texts, they found that doctors in China are removing the organs of condemned prisoners while they were still alive. This is horrifying. You know how a lot of people want to be cremated after they die? Well, imagine if you died because you were cremated. Many of the prisoners being killed are political or religious dissidents, like Uyghurs and Falun Gong practitioners. The report documents this at 56 hospitals in 33 cities across China. Many of those are military hospitals. And because the organ removal is the cause of death, it means the doctors themselves are the executioners. That sounds awful. Don't you just hate it when someone tries getting you to do something at work that isn't in your job description? Anyway, this is why the practice of forced organ harvesting breaks 2 long-established taboos in medicine. The dead donor rule, which forbids extracting transplant organs from living donors, and the injunction against physicians participating in executions. Only under a predatory government with little transparency, accountability, or rule of law could such practices persist. And China has such a rampant system of profiteering that officials in China's Henan province once published this actual price list for human organs. A human heart is listed at 10,000 yuan, which is about $15,000. Hey, that's a steal. Henan province later took down that price list, which just goes to show great prices never last. So who's buying these organs? Well, rich people who need transplants. A lot of them are wealthy Communist Party cadres. Others are transplant tourists who fly in from other countries. You see, transplant tourists who can be on transplant waiting lists in their home countries for months or years are enticed by the fact that a trip to China yields an organ match in just a sliver of that time. In fact, websites advertise transplants in China in 5 different languages and in some cases guarantee availability of a matching organ within 2 weeks. The Kashgar airport, which is near many of the concentration camps in Xinjiang, even has a fast lane for human organ transplants. Although since it's at the airport, there's probably a 50% markup on everything. Now that this latest study has been published, exposing all this killing people and selling their organs for profit, what's going to happen? Big corporations will probably get together and say, you know what, we have to do something. Like triple their investments in China. Can we get another look at that price list for human parts? I want to know how much it'll cost to get these businessmen a spine. Now it's time for me to answer a question from a China Uncensored fan who supports us on Patreon or Locals. AC Mariner 99 on Patreon asks, is it true that China portrays itself as a developing economy so as to avoid the green energy mandates that are levied on Western countries, while on the flip side also advertises itself as a world-class economy? How does CCP doublespeak work in this scenario? Good question. Yes, China portrays itself as a developing economy so it can get away with more pollution and less restrictions. They even use it to get low-interest development loans from the World Bank. And that's because there's no standard for what it means to be a developing economy. So they can make that claim and use it to hold themselves to low environmental standards, which is something I'd like to try in my next relationship. Hey babe, I'm a developing person. You need to hold me to lower standards. So when that same regime claims it's going to start using organs from voluntary donors, don't be surprised when that also turns out to be falsified. Thanks for your question, and thank you to everyone who supports China Uncensored on Patreon. Learn more by going to patreon.com/China Uncensored. Support us by pledging $1 or more per episode and get some cool perks, like me answering your question on the show. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. See you next time.